Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This is going to be my new Superman video. There was a huge announcement you all probably saw in your feeds. Henry Cavill is leaving the role. Like, James Gunn made an announcement to all explain what's going on, because in the same breath, they said that they're starting to make a new Superman movie at the beginning of next year, but it's not going to be Henry Cavill's Superman. It's going to be during a completely different part of the timeline.
There's no one on this planet that can stop me.
I'll explain how this fits into all of James Gunn's plans, because obviously there's going to be a bunch of recastings. They're basically reimagining the DC universe. It's basically like a rebirth type of event like you saw in the comics a couple years ago. But this is Henry Cavill's statement that he literally just made, and James Gunn posted his response like right at the same time. So clearly it was coordinated, like, okay, we'll both post our statements about this at the same time. Henry Cavill says, "I've just had a meeting with James Gunn and Peter Safran, and it's sad news, everyone. I will, after all, not be returning as Superman. After being told by the studio to announce my return back in October." That part actually confirms that as of October recently, he was coming back to do Man of Steel.
I wanted to wait until the weekend was over before posting this, because I wanted to give you all a chance to watch Black Adam. But now that plenty of you have, I wanted to make it official that I am back as Superman. And the image you see on this post and what you saw in Black Adam are just a very small taste of things to come. So there's a lot to be thankful for, and I'll get to that in time. But I want to thank you guys most of all. Thank you for your support, and thank you for your patience. I promise it will be rewarded.
So there were a lot of plans right before James Gunn was hired. Once the paperwork on that dried, then James Gunn and his partner came up with a plan to reboot DC, and that's when all the changes started being made. Like, I just did a video about Wonder Woman 3 being canceled, Patty Jenkins is basically off the project, Gal Gadot might be recast, she might come back, Jason Momoa is definitely done as Aquaman after Aquaman 2, even though he might come back as Lobo. And we know that Ezra Miller is definitely out.
My name is Ezra Miller, and I am criminally excited to be a part of the Justice League.
But then Henry Cavill goes on to say, prior to their hire, talking about James Gunn's hire, this news isn't the easiest, but that's life. The changing of the guard is something that happens, talking about the big reboot at DC with new actors coming on. He says, I respect that. James and Peter have a universe to build, and I wish them all involved with the new universe the best of luck and the happiest of fortunes. He's being a real champ about all this, because you have to hand it to him. He just left his role at The Witcher Netflix because it sounds like he was planning for a big push of Superman at DC. He goes on to say, for those who have been at my side through the years, we can mourn for a bit, and then we must remember, Superman is still around. Everything he stands for still exists, and the examples he sets for us are still there. My turn to wear the cape has passed, but what Superman stands for never will. And it's been a fun ride with you all, onwards and upwards. So everyone pour one out for Henry Cavill. He's a totally awesome dude. Wish him the best of luck. Time for him to call Kevin Feige back. Like, who's he going to be playing at Marvel now that he's totally free?
Because, spoiler,
everybody fan casting him as a new version of Hyperion because there's been rumors about them doing Squadron Supreme in the MCU soon. If you don't know who Hyperion is, it's basically Marvel's version of Superman, but a darker version of Superman. Hyperion is an Eternal, like the Eternals movie we saw a little while ago, like a celestial robot basically. But he has the same backstory as Superman. His planet was destroyed and he was fired through space to planet Earth. So making all the Marvel casting jokes now, like everybody fan casting Henry Cavill as different Marvel characters, James Gunn's statement actually says that Henry Cavill might come back in the future as Superman. This is what he says about it, and he talks about the new Superman movie that they're starting to make at the beginning of next year. He starts by saying Peter and I have a DC slate ready to go, which is basically like their next 10-year plan for DC building up to a new Justice League movie, their version of a DC rebirth plan in the movies. He goes on to say, which we couldn't be more over the moon about. We'll be able to share some exciting information about our first projects at the beginning of next year, meaning that they have a bunch of projects that they'll announce in January and February. That includes DC movies and future DC HBO shows like the big budget HBO series they've been working on. But then he says among those on the slate is Superman, like a new Superman movie. In the initial stages, our story will be focusing on an earlier part of Superman's life, so the character will not be played by Henry Cavill. So that's his official statement, like, no, it's not going to be Henry Cavill coming back for Man of Steel 2. But Superman is a huge priority for them. And when they say it's taking place earlier in Superman's timeline, I think that what they're saying is it's more like the Man of Steel movie, where it did an origin story for the character really, really early in his career. Like, Man of Steel was literally an origin story. We saw him become the character for the first time. I think what they're going to do is they're going to do what Matt Reeves did for the Batman movie, but with Superman. Like it'll be Superman Year 2, the way that the Batman movie with Robert Pattinson was Batman Year 2. So it won't be a complete retelling of the origin story, the same way that Matt Reeves didn't want to do the death of the Waynes again. Like the movie referenced Batman's parents' death, but we'd seen the Waynes die so many times that it's like, we're gonna do that one more time, we're just gonna skip over that. How many times do you want to see those pearls? And what they're doing is they're actually doing all these separate Justice League characters the way they should have done it originally and slowly build them up to the next Justice League movie so that by the time they do the next Justice League, like Justice League Rebirth, whatever they want to call it, you've lived with the characters for several years, the same way that Marvel did it back in Phase 1 with the first Avengers movie.
I understood that reference.
Marvel Phase 1ing the DC Universe, DC Phase 1, but Phase 1 of a brand new timeline. Everybody wondering now what they're going to do at the end of that Flash movie to try and set this up, or if they'll just cold turkey reboot the franchise. Oh, by the way, it's rebooted now. This new movie you're going to come and see in a couple years, going to be totally fresh. If they really wanted to, they could retune the end of the Flash movie just to set that up. Like, oh, by the way, we're going to reboot everything and use Flashpoint to do it. Because they were already kind of doing that with the movie to begin with, before all the crazy Ezra Miller stuff started happening. James Gunn goes on to say, but we just had a great meeting with Henry, talking about Henry Cavill, and we're big fans. We talked about a number of exciting possibilities to work together in the future, meaning that they're leaving the door open for Henry Cavill to come back in the future of DC movies. Like, this isn't absolutely the end for him, but it is meant to be the end of him as the main version of Superman. Like, that'll be whoever this new person they cast is as the younger version of the character, and that'll be the one that you see in all the big crossovers most of the time. James Gunn did confirm that he is the person who is writing the new Superman movie, which makes me feel a little bit better about the situation. Like, I'm really bummed out that Henry Cavill is leaving. That really sucks. Really wanted to see Man of Steel 2. But I am a little bit more hyped for James Gunn's take on a fresh version of Superman if it's going to be a completely fresh slate of the DC universe. I made the comparison a while ago that he was actually doing a version of what he did at the beginning of the new Suicide Squad movie, where he killed off a bunch of the original characters from that first Suicide Squad movie, but acknowledged some of the continuity and did something fresh with the characters. Like, he kind of made it his own, but he acknowledged what came before. Him getting rid of a lot of the Justice League actors you could think as being a version of that. And let me know, Henry Cavill comes back. How do you want him to come back? Like, do you want it to be a flash forward situation where he's still playing his version of Superman, but he's like the far future version of whoever this new Superman is going to be? Or is it just going to be a multiverse twist where he says that like all the Zack Snyder era of Justice League characters in those movies took place in a different universe, which is probably the easier way to go. Here's where we get to the Batman of it all too, because a lot of people are like, what about Ben Affleck Batman? James Gunn literally said as part of the same thread talking about the new Superman movie recasting Henry Cavill that they had just met with Ben Affleck yesterday as I'm posting this video, so like very recently, about directing one of the new DC movies. He already said he was going to stop playing Batman a while ago. He did shoot a cameo scene for Aquaman 2. I don't know if they got rid of that because of what James Gunn did recently, because they shot that before James Gunn was hired to reboot DC movies. So like up to last month, the plan for DC movies' path forward was completely different. Now, if Ben Affleck were to direct a DC movie, it probably wouldn't be The Batman 2 or the Batman franchise because Matt Reeves is directing all the Batman sequels. If he does say yes, they might say something about it early next year. You also probably saw the news about Robert Pattinson's Batman early this morning because one of the news outlets, Variety, reported that they were actually going to make him the new main version in the Justice League crossovers. But then, like, literally right after Variety posted that, James Gunn jumped on it and said, absolutely not. That is totally false. There's no way we're going to make Matt Reeves cross over his Batman with our Justice League DC movies.
Interesting. No.
Matt Reeves also chimed in right after that, too, on James Gunn post saying, oh, thank you so much. That's great news. Obviously, he was very tongue-in-cheek, like he knew what James Gunn's plans were because Matt Reeves had already had meetings with him about the future of DC. What they said prior is that James Gunn's plans to completely reboot everything at DC do not include the Batman with Robert Pattinson and Matt Reeves franchise and the Joaquin Phoenix Joker franchise. Everything else, like only those two things, seem like they're off limits. They'll both be allowed to continue to exist in their own universes, at least for now. But for the younger people that are watching this, best example is recasting Spider-Man so many times in such a quick time period. Like, you go back to the early 2000s, we have Tobey Maguire, they don't make Spider-Man 4, they recast Andrew Garfield, he doesn't make it to Amazing Spider-Man 3, even though he's back now. Within a very quick time period, they wind up recasting to the Tom Holland MCU version of Spider-Man. They make the deal with Sony, and it winds up being a completely different thing for several years until Spider-Man No Way Home, when they do their big multiverse movie where Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield come back. And they completely recontextualize their movie, saying that, oh no, it's all still canon because of the multiverse now. So I wouldn't be surprised if they do something similar in the future with this new DC reboot of the movies. We're in the new continuity now that James Gunn is creating this DC Rebirth timeline. He recasts a bunch of the actors, starts fresh, does younger versions of the characters, but then they build up to a Crisis on Infinite Earths in the movies, like their version of Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame, or Avengers 5 or Avengers 6 Secret Wars, whatever you want to call it. And that's when you bring Henry Cavill, Ben Affleck, all the other old actors back to play the characters again in a multiverse context. So I think that's part of what James Gunn was talking about when he said that he would potentially come back in the future. Like, Henry Cavill will come back. We've been talking to him about doing something in the future together. Now, just because James Gunn said that he's the person who's been writing this new Superman movie with the younger version of the character doesn't mean that he'll be the one to direct. I mean, it's always possible, but if you remember, when James Gunn initially went to direct the Suicide Squad movie, he met with Warner Brothers. They basically told him he could do any character, anything that he wanted with any part of the continuity. He said during their first meeting, they initially pitched him doing a new Superman movie, but obviously it was a big question as to which Superman it would be. Everyone, let me know in the comments, though, who do you want to play this younger version of Superman? If he's still going to be like a late 20s-something actor, but it'll be like Superman Year 2. And who do you want to direct the movie, assuming that it probably won't be Zack Snyder? Like, I don't think that he's going to bring back Zack Snyder, otherwise they would have announced that a while ago. Like I said in my other recent DC videos, this is a developing situation. They'll continue to make more announcements. James Gunn even said in his post that they would announce their new slate for like the next 10 years early next year. Maybe not the entire slate, but at least a couple of the next upcoming movies after next year's actual slate. There'll be 4 DC movies coming out next year, and that's not going to change. They'll still release those. The Rock is sweating bullets now, hoping that he doesn't get recast too, because it sounds like he had a lot of plans. He brought Henry Cavill with the express purpose that he was going to reignite the DC universe. In related news, if you want to know what Zack Snyder was going to do with Justice League 2, I did like a full breakdown of that because he revealed the entire plot of the movie, and it is nuts. Like, it is huge. Click here to learn about that. And click here for my Guardians of the Galaxy 3 trailer video and Easter eggs. Thank you so much for watching. Everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.